Hi, everyone. Hello, peer tutors, and welcome to the cross-cultural communication training session. My name is Allyson McVickar. I am from the Office of Multicultural Affairs. I'm excited to be with you, even though this is a recorded session. We're still hoping that you'll be able to be interactive and hopefully take a lot from this session. So really happy to be with you all today, and we'll go ahead and get started. So as we talk about minority students, students of color, international students specifically, will be about this presentation as you begin to work with these populations in your roles on campus. So I did want to give you a brief introduction about the international student population specifically. That is a group that I tend to work with most in OMA. So we have about 1,000 international students. It's a little over 5% of the total UMassL population. We have about 400 undergrads, 550 grads, and then 70 other, which are usually visiting scholars that are here for 1 or 2 semesters. The top 3 countries are China, India, and South Korea. We have about 124 countries total at UMass Lowell that study mostly engineering, computer science, and public health, amongst many other majors. And most of them live on North Campus and off-campus housing. So when we talk about intercultural communication, right, cross-cultural communication, we talk about what culture is. And so for the purpose of this presentation, we define it as shared assumptions, beliefs, and values of a group, which result in characteristic behavior. I love this quote. I always put it in here in terms of thinking about culture. We see the world as it is. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. And so we think about that. And I want you to think about that as we go through this presentation and think about your cultural background specifically. We talk about communications and culture, right? They're very closely related. They share a similar meaning system. And we want to think about, what does culture mean to you, right? What is your definition of culture? So let's think about that as we go through this presentation together. I do want to kick off by talking about the iceberg model of culture. So there's 2 different types of culture here. The surface culture, which are, on the surface, things you can see about a person, usually these assumptions that you make, that you assume, right? But that is their culture, their skin color, assumed gender, assumed age, assumed race, right? Nationality can be assumed as well. But there are these deeper cultures that you may not experience, right off the bat, right? Their language, their education, their talents, their work style, their beliefs. So when you start to work with these international students, and the beauty of being in the US is to not assume that an international name is to an international student, right? It could be a domestic student. But these are these surface culture things that you're going to experience. And as you start to work with similar students for a while throughout the semester or the year, you will start to learn their deeper culture. And please don't be afraid to share your deep culture with them as well. So again, just keep in mind that there's a lot more than meets the eye for a lot of these students. So I do want to try this activity. I want you to think of your background, your beliefs, your cultures, the way you grew up, the languages you speak, right? The things you have seen in your lifetime. And so I want you to go ahead and talk amongst yourselves and tell us why these pictures might be culturally different. Why are these pictures different? So we're going to do these for the next couple slides. There'll be 2 pictures on a slide. One of them will be culturally appropriate. One of them may not be for certain reasons. And so I'd like to pause here and give you a chance to discuss, why are these pictures culturally different? Okay, so hopefully you were able to discuss that a little bit. And we will have the answer on the next slide. So in the UK, it is considered very inappropriate to touch members of the royal family, especially during a photo opportunity, right? So this is an explanation. So LeBron is in the wrong. You're not supposed to be touching the royal family, right? And that's just a cultural thing in the UK. So you'll see these in the next couple slides here. So how about this one? Again, I will pause. Why are these pictures culturally different? Okay, so hopefully you were able to discuss with each other. It's the tipping. So in the US, it's really common to tip 15 to 20% in addition to a total bill, right, to thank the wait staff. Whereas in many other countries, tipping is considered rude. It's insinuating that they don't make good money at their jobs, right? But here in the US, tipping, a lot of waitresses, waiters live off of tips. So it's just something to consider as you either travel or here in the US are discussing these sorts of things with international students. They might not be used to it. Okay, how about this one? Why are these pictures culturally different? Okay, let's go ahead and see the answer. So in many East Asian countries, sticking chopsticks in rice is considered rude or even an omen of death. It symbolizes incense at a funeral. So of course, the explanation is the incense piece, not tipping. And so if you go to an Asian restaurant, for example, or if you decide to befriend an international student and go out to a restaurant with them, you may see that this is considered very negative. So you can just put your chopsticks right next to the bowl there. Okay, and how about this one? Why are these pictures culturally different? What do you see here? Hopefully you're able to discuss. So this is about greeting elders. So you see this picture here. In Nigeria, it's common to greet elders by laying flat on the ground at their feet, particularly by men. And in many East Asian and Southeast Asian countries, it's common to greet elders by bowing. So you may have seen that other photo of bowing as a sign of respect. And as we know, greeting elders here in the US is like greeting anybody else, but you may see with international students specifically from these parts of the world, greet elders and treat elders with much respect. So they may even greet you that way because they are coming to you for help, and you may be senior to them, and so you may have to remind them to call you by their nickname or whatever you're most comfortable with. So don't be surprised if they use lots of respect towards you. You might not be used to that. Okay, great. So I hope you were able to chat about those cultural differences and kind of get your brain thinking about those differences and what that could look like. So we want to talk about cultural differences in learning because you're going to be experiencing this a lot with our international students. So many of them might be used to memorizing a lot of information. They might not be used to so much, this thinking critically about information and talking about it in a way that makes sense to them, right? They may just be used to that self-regulated learning. They might be used to a lot of lecture style. The group projects might be completely new to them. So please be patient with them if you can. Read the body language, right? There could be, some gestures, some touch, some maybe lack of eye contact. There's lots of things to consider here that you might not be used to. And again, that respect for seniority is going to come back into play. They may call you Mr. or Miss or Mrs. or whatever they end up calling you, and just remind them gently, hey, call me Allie. Have them be comfortable as possible as you continue your relationship with them. There's going to be that struggle between formal and non-formal classroom settings that they are not used to. So in many cases, in many countries, they usually never speak with their professors one-on-one. Usually, like I said, it's in a lecture style, so they may never have a conversation with them privately. And so they're also not going to be used to calling their professors by their first name or something really informal that way. So again, I would just err on the side of caution and say to those students, if they're not sure what to call their professors, just say, hey, ask your professor. They will let you know. Some professors like to be called doctor here. Some professors like to be called Allie here, right? Like it's completely kind of up to the professor, but they're going to come from cultures where they never call them by their first name. And so it's going to be a bit of an adjustment for them. Some of them also have family pressures to do well. I like to say this story about one of my students from China came here to study computer science and had these big dreams for her from her family when she came here. She came here and fell in love with the arts and became a graphic designer. Unfortunately, her family was not very happy about that, and that was pretty difficult for her. So there's lots behind just the student themselves wanting to better themselves. They would also be expected to go home and help their families. Some other quick things to consider, eye contact. Like I said, there are some students, especially in places like Japan and China, where too much eye contact is considered disrespectful. But here in the US, eye contact means you're paying attention. That's a sign of respect. So they're coming to this culture, which is very, very different. They might ask a lot of questions or too little questions. So it's really good to say, hey, did you understand what I meant? Do you have any questions? And give them time to process, right? Because it's in a different language, and then give them a chance to ask some questions. They might be smiling during conflict. They just don't know, the social cues here in the US. It's very different. Not displaying active listening skills. They are definitely listening. They could just be a little bit distracted because there's just so much going on. Refusal to engage in discussion or debates. So in a lot of classrooms abroad, debating the professor, debating your classmates is really not common. These discussion-based grades, right? We always try to tell them, you need to speak up in class because 5 to 10% of your grade is about discussion and about, speaking up in class. So we need to make sure, to say it to them as this is a chance for you to, practice your English skills, right? This is why you came here. This is why it's going to enhance their learning experience. And so we want to make sure that they take advantage of these experiences as much as possible. So try to help them, encourage them to discuss more and speak up in class. There is definitely a gender bias still in many places. For example, in Saudi Arabia, only a few years ago, women were allowed to drive, right? A lot of these places are still kind of catching up to how modernized we are here in the US. It's definitely getting better, I will say that 100%. So just keep that in mind as you kind of test the waters with these students and have as much mutual respect as you can. And of course, age as well. Kind of bringing in that seniority piece again, where they might really want to make sure that you feel like you're being respected, especially for your age. So I always like to show this cultural adaptation curve, wanting to show you kind of the 4 stages that international students go through. If any of you are international students, this might feel similar. Or if any of you have lived in different countries, this might feel similar as well. So our international students right now are in this honeymoon stage, right? They've worked really, really hard to get to the US. They've watched all the movies and seen all the TV shows about what it's going to be like, and they're taking it all in, right? They're about a month or 2 in. They're really excited to be here, and they're taking it all in. Some of them haven't been out of their homes in a few years, right? Just like us. So really exciting. There's going to be a bit of a dip, probably around finals time. So you may see an uptick in international students coming to see you at this time. I will warn you, they might be a little irritable, a little hostile. It's kind of a harsh word, but they might just be homesick. They're going to be missing their families a lot at this point. They're going to be missing their home food. They're going to be just mentally exhausted, speaking English a lot. It's going to be exhausting for them. So please keep your patience with them if possible. If you ever need us to step in, if you need some help, you can always come to me. I have my contact information at the end of this presentation. Then in about, the holiday time, New Year time in the US here, they do tend to start to come back on the uptick. So they tend to have more of a sense of humor about kind of the funny differences that they're experiencing instead of being irritable. And then, by month 6, So we're talking, beginning of next semester, mid next semester, they're starting to feel a little bit better, starting to feel more at home. They have their routines. They've found some friends, hopefully. They found some favorite places to eat, some local places like that. So really starting to feel at home. So hopefully you'll start to see, these different stages happen, and that eventually they'll start to feel a little bit more comfortable here. So some more tips to create an inclusive culture as you're starting to work with these students. Please don't assume that a foreign name is an international student, right? We had mentioned this earlier. Beauty of living in the US, you might get a foreign name, but again, that does not mean it's an international student. So you can ask some questions, right? They definitely want to talk about their family, their food, their holidays, especially around the holiday time, because we all celebrate a lot of different things. So try to be as inclusive as possible. What their academic structure is like in their native country, the length of time in the US, right? How long have you been here? That sort of thing. Share something about yourself, make a connection. If you've had certain foods, if you've traveled to their home countries, talk about it with them. Please make a connection with them beforehand. Of course, you can jump into the process if you'd like, but really make sure to try to make a connection and let them know that you can talk to them about things. Explain the tutoring process, the rules, the expectations thoroughly. Try your best to speak slowly and enunciate properly so that they know the information, and try to double check with them. Like, are you sure you understand? Just want to make sure you understand, that sort of thing. Avoid using slang or figures of speech, right? Like better late than never or beat around the bush. They probably won't know what this means. And if you do say it and they kind of look lost, try to explain, what they mean. So try to avoid any sort of slang if you can. Sarcasm can be pretty confusing, right? So we want to stay simple and direct when making a point. So again, speak clearly, kindly, and enunciate. We see this a lot, unfortunately, where students don't understand, and raising your voice is not going to make them understand more, right? It's the slowing down, it's the enunciating, and say, am I going too fast? Do you want me to repeat that? Use visuals if you can. Take out a piece of paper, write things down. Make sure they really sort of understand what you're trying to get through to them. And don't take common knowledge for granted. The acronyms, we have a lot of acronyms here: UML, OMA, ICC, UC, lots of acronyms. So don't just kind of think that they know what those are. Understanding plagiarism. A lot of students don't know what plagiarism is that come from other countries. They think copying and pasting work from other sources and other authors is a compliment to the original author. They don't quite understand that they need to cite it. So we try to tell them when they come here that it is extremely important to cite your work, because if you don't, you can get in a lot of trouble. And so we want to avoid that as much as possible. So please, again, help us help them understanding what plagiarism is. So in addition to all of that, they're also navigating these new skills, right? Reading and speaking in a new language, this new discussion-based instruction, the way they communicate with professors is probably a lot more informal than what they're used to. A new metric system, right? For whatever reason, US and maybe a few other countries are in that Fahrenheit and feet in the metric system, and they use meters and Celsius. And so just keep that in mind as you're talking about like the weather and things like that. SIS and Blackboard, navigating a new campus, making new friends. There's so many new skills that they are trying to sort of accomplish all at once. And so if you ever, come across a student that's really having a hard time, and you can tell that maybe they're going into a bit of a depression that you are certainly not responsible helping them with, but please either send them to us here in OMA, to me specifically. They should know who I am, as well as the ISSO, the counseling office. I have all the information here in this PowerPoint, but please send them our way. So some of the burdens that they do go through, they usually are charged quite a bit more than a domestic student would for tuition and fees. They cannot work study jobs. They're not eligible for FAFSA or any sort of financial aid through the US government. So the financial struggles that they go through are significant. They can't obtain a social security number until they find an on-campus or off-campus job. And again, that off-campus job has to be, under certain circumstances, can only be in their field of study. They can only work 20 hours per week on campus during the school year. They can work full-time on the during winter break and spring break, as well as the summer. But again, the financial burden is difficult, and they have to provide funding required on the visa document, right before they come to campus for their full, semester or full year that they can afford to be here. So again, the financial burden is significant. And so if you have students that are struggling, please send them to the ISSO, send them to Job Hawk. If they're looking for jobs on campus, of course, they would be eligible for the departmental jobs. So we want to make sure that they know that those exist. There are jobs for them, it's just really limited. So we want you to build trust, right? And understand their barriers. So if a student is telling you something that might have happened to them, student to student, explain that confidentiality and that, but we do have a counseling service available to you. And we want them to self-identify as an international student, right? So we want to say, are you an international student? Not just assuming that they are. So we want to make sure to ask. You can ask them where they're from. You can ask them, I like to say, where did you go to high school? Where did you go to your previous institution? That way it doesn't seem like, we're kind of putting them in the box, like, you're not from here, where are you from? You know what I mean? So to help them feel more included is important. Recognize their struggles that we have talked about, right? Their financial struggles, that they're homesick, this immigration-based issues, that, it goes on and on. But there's also some serious discrimination and biases happening around, right? With this COVID-19 pandemic, right? It's been a really, really hard year for many of our international students. So try your best to be as inclusive as you can. Understand their perceptions of the US and yours. This is a great way to get to know different cultures without, during your job. It's such a rewarding experience, I would think. So provide that sense of welcome. We do have, if students are having any issues with English support, you can either email ISSO or email me. We do have Friday English conversation groups through OMA. And so I'm happy to share that information with you. So in terms of what we offer in OMA for our international students, if you're finding they want to get more involved on campus, these are great places to go. One of our most popular programs is the Pair Up program. So we have a buddy program that matches international students and domestic students, if you haven't heard about it before, based on common majors, common interests. And so if you have any students that want to get involved in that, we also accept domestic students too. So happy to have any more information sent to you on that. It's also on our website. So like I mentioned, we have English conversation groups that meet up on Friday mornings, virtually still right now, just because it's a little bit more convenient for students across campus. And we have a new ESL LibGuide. So there's more information coming on that in terms of ESL support. We also have weekly culture shock talks on Fridays that are right before the English conversation groups virtually to help them as they adjust to US college life. And then we have international cultural clubs and events. So we have over 40 cultural clubs. We celebrate Heritage Months every month. We have cultural festivals, all sorts of things. So help us spread the word so we can have these students feeling a little bit better acclimated to campus. So again, to leave you with this, support for our underrepresented students, I have my contact information here. Our office is located in University Crossing on the 3rd floor in Multicultural Affairs, or OMA. And I also put the ISSO's information here, the International Students and Scholars Office. So that office deals with all of their immigration and compliance issues. So anything visa related can go to the ISSO. My office and me, we do everything else. We do all the student support, all the fun stuff, we like to say. But if students are having any issues with their visa requirements, you have to send them to the ISSO. And they have recently moved. They're actually right next to University Crossing in the new Graduate Services building on the 2nd floor. So they can be reached there. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your training. Again, feel free to contact or come visit us at any point, OMA, U Crossing, third floor, if you need any further support while you work with these students. So thank you again so much and have a great rest of your day.